Building Commission meeting.
Strong to pull those controls.
Ed? I'm going to call the meeting of December 20th to order at 6:15. We're in the Zito room. The mayor has joined us. Gary Arazian has joined us. KBA, Todd and Sean. Chief LaChance has joined us remotely. Mason is here, and we have the pleasure of having the Sun Chronicle cover us tonight. So, first order of business is the December 6th meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, take it away.
Sure thing. Excuse me. Well, thank you very much for having us back. Since our last meeting, we have conducted our specialist, Manitow Incorporated, has conducted the response time study for the proposed sites. That begins with my computer working for me. Let's see if this will do it. Thank you. It begins with analyzing your current locations. So the headquarters site in downtown, Briggs Corner, Twin Village, and South Station. Those are the buildings that are associated with that to the right there. The data was provided by the Attleboro Fire Department to Manitow Incorporated, started in October 26th of 2022 and went through October 26th, 2023. Excuse me, August, not October. And that was brought back to his office, all basically analyzed according to the National Fire Incident Reporting System. What the results from that is, about 76% of your calls for the department are EMS related. You have about 22% that are other. We'll kind of go over what those categories of other are. And then about 2% that are fire related calls. All of this study, that the study basically is conducted looking at the department's call taking or receiving turnout. The results that we're going to look at here in the maps that are coming to follow all show the drive time. So we want between a 4 to a 5 minute drive time. That's what we'll be displaying. But a little bit more at the moment about your stations. So station 1, or the headquarters station, that has 1 engine, 1 ladder, 1 ambulance, a command vehicle, and 8 staff members. Your south station, or station 2, that is 1 engine, 1 ambulance, and 5 members. The Twin Village is 1 engine with 3 firefighters, and then the Briggs Corner is 1 engine, 1 ambulance, and 3 firefighters are cross-trained. Overall incidences, this all kind of comes into play in some of the next information, but
That's per shift, that's not the entire fire department.
that's per shift, correct, thank you.
I want to be clear to the public.
Yes,
And the interesting thing is that station numbers go up to 5, but there's no 3.
correct.
Go ahead.
1, 2, 4, and 5, yes.
Doesn't South Attleboro also have a ladder truck?
No, it does not. Correct, Chief?
We had a lot of trucks been out of service for over a year for repairs. So at some point we're hoping to get it back, but it's crossman with just 2 firefighters and no officers, so it really doesn't really serve the purpose very well with that staffing level.
Just some other bits of information that come out of the report. The incidents based on the time of day, majority of your calls, just under 50%, are during the day hours, 8 to 4. Evening hours is your second highest amount at 30, and your night is, which is 12 a.m. to 8 a.m., is at 22% of the calls. This map here demonstrates the incidents for the medical calls, the medical response. So you can see the density in the downtown area and down in the southern part of the of the town, or city, excuse me.
It looks like it's clustered along Route 1 as well as downtown then, right?
Yes.
Does that match with just demographic density too?
It is, Mayor. I
obviously?
was just going to say, those are the two densest
Right.
census tracts in the city, 6314, which is the downtown, and right around 6315. And then if you get down to South Attleboro, I guess if you say west of Route 1, that's census tract 6311, two densest census tracts.
Thank you, Gary.
That other incidents, those are, hazardous conditions and no fire, service calls, lockouts, public assistance calls, the list there. I don't necessarily need to, false alarms, weather disasters, things of that nature, kind of everything outside of the other two categories. Your second highest call volume or calls for service, again, as you said, the two dentist areas, the downtown and that southwest corner as well. And then the fire incidences, those are structure fires, brush fires, grass fires, and vehicle fires. And that's the call indication there.
With the change in the way we live, with sprinklers, with better construction, the fire department doesn't fight very many fires anymore, does it?
It's a common track that they not just, even though they're still labeled the fire department, they handle such a wide variety that the few of these buildings were designed to handle just the structure or the fire department service, and the service has grown so far beyond what they used to do many years ago, of just being fire service or fire calls. So the scenarios.
Can I just add some?
Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, can I add some? That's a misleading comment about the number of fires. The reason the percentage is so much lower is because our call volume is so much higher. We still have 200 or so structure fires a year, which is a fair amount for a city our size, but we do 10,000 calls total. So I don't want the public to be misled thinking that there's not a need for fire suppression, because that need hasn't changed at all.
Well, I wasn't meaning to say that, Chief. I was just saying that, your department's, the services your department provides have gone way beyond just fighting structure fires, correct?
That is accurate.
So the scenarios that we were asked to analyze or look at for the drive times was obviously the option A, which is the current station format, the existing headquarters remaining where it is. Or we always want to base, excuse me, let me backtrack. We always want to base off of what our current situation is. So we analyze where your stations are now and how they respond. So that's scenario A or option A. B was to renovate in place. So where the headquarters is currently at 100 Union Street. An option to look at placing the fire department at 77 Park. Also to look at 706 Pleasant Ave, 50 John Williams Street, and 887 County Street.
And again, just if we could go back there for a second, we don't own that land on Commerce Way. The federal government owns John Williams Street. The area behind the Harbor One Bank is owned by a private company. But we did want to take a look at those as potential sites.
Correct. So option C, D, and E, D, E, and F are, have implications with land purchase for the project as well. So your baseline map here, your existing condition, you can see the green area is that 5-minute drive time. The mint, let's call it, for the sake of just having the color code to go by, that's your 4-minute drive time. So you can see, majority of the city is covered, barring just a few small areas to the way north, to the way east, and to the way southwest, where there's not, they're beyond that 5-minute mark. So again, just kind of going through the 6 options. We'll go right into Obviously, if we renovate the existing fire station in place, your travel time, your drive time doesn't change. It's just a matter of it stays in the same location. Some things about the site, it's a 1.3 acre lot. It houses the existing station, so a renovate in place is a little bit challenging. If the better option is to move the fire department out, so there would be temporary facilities involved with that, but.
Yeah,
Since
let's
of the-
just follow up on that for a minute. The site is small, so we might need to acquire additional property if we were to build what we need.
Correct,
Then the second problem is, where do they go
in the meantime,
while you tear down what's there and build something new, right?
correct.
That can have a significant price tag.
It can, yes.
And we're also talking at least 18, probably 24 months that they'd have to be homeless.
Depending upon the complexity of demolition, renovation, and those things, if we were to renovate, kind of keep the building as it is where it is, that extends, so yes, anywhere between 18 to 24 months, based on any number of typical scenarios.
Okay.
But the essence of the report, coverage for the town stays identical. And you can kind of see that, as a side-by-side comparison there. Option C was basically move to the police station site, right behind City Hall. That you can see just shifts ever so slightly. There are some minor shifts, and it's really difficult to tell by itself, so that's why I kind of stayed with the format of a side-by-side comparison. The red circle areas show some of those, minor shifts in service, where you get a little bit more in the 5-minute mark off to the adjacent to 95 there, as opposed to your existing scenario. But you still have a pretty good coverage of the town, and based on the report, option C was a very close alternative to staying in the same location, or a recommended alternative. Excuse me. Again, I didn't go over some of the site details, but we're kind of familiar with that one. There may be some need, depending upon the configuration of the building, for some additional properties over there, but we'd have to see how that would fit for and work for the department's desired layout for that department, or that building. Option D was to go up to the Pleasant Street site. So you can see here, that this site did provide a considerable limitation of visibility for public and a little bit of public access. It was a larger site at 5.3 acres, but it does modify your response to some of that major area of incidents in that downtown area. And you can see that indicated here with a large circle to the left, where a lot of that mint color went to the light green, went to the 5-minute mark. And some of that light green that was between 95 and 152 has now gone to beyond 5 minutes. So this was not one of the really recommended scenarios by our consultant.
And we don't own it.
And you don't own it, yes. Option E was the John Williams site. This one, again, is not city-owned. It was a little bit of a larger site, 3.4 acres. It is adjacent to a railroad, so there is some consideration taken for an emergency response with that proximity. However, although it is one of the alternatives that's recommended, it did take a bunch of the northeast corner, or the north corner of the town, and put it outside of that 5-minute mark for option E.
Just a quick question. When things are outside of that 5-minute mark, does it affect rate you pay for homeowner's insurance? Maybe you don't know that, but.
Not right
it
from the top of my
It
head.
strikes me that the farther away the engine is, the more likely the insurance company is to want more money.
There are a lot more things.
So I can answer that.
Yeah, Chief.
That's one of the standard questions on most homeowners insurance policies is the proximity to a advanced fire station. The other part of that is our ISO rating, which we're currently at a Class 2 fire department, that if we were to drop to a Class 3, that would also have an effect on the insurance rates. And one thing about the drive time that I think is important to note, that's not the same as the response time, because that's assuming the trucks are in the stations. And with the call volume that we have of 10,000 for the staffing level that we're at, more often than not, our trucks are not always available for calls. So we're going out of district a lot, so that response time is much higher than the drive time.
So if I understand the chief correctly, you're assuming that everybody's in the station, the vehicles are in the station when you're doing this.
Correct. That's the baseline of station placement, is, everybody's able to respond from the station. There is a chart, which one of the few I did not include in here, but it did show, based on incidences, what the response times were, as kind of an average of what the response time for the department was, as well as part of the report. Continuing on here, option F was to look at the Commerce Waste site. And again, just very quickly, it was composed of two sites, a 28-acre site, which is great for the amount of area that we would need, in the 2.7 area, 0.27 acre site for access, redundant access, if you would. Again, this one is not currently owned, although it does say current fire station location. I apologize for that typo. Excuse me, but it did pull a lot of that, a lot of the equipment kind of south in the city, and left the northern part of the city beyond that 5-minute drive time. So ultimately, based on the report, B was the optimal scenario, if you would, with C and E being kind of those secondary.
Remind us, was B putting it behind City Hall?
B was renovating at its current location.
Please.
So yeah, that was kind of flagged as being the best scenario for coverage and drive time throughout the city, with options C and E being satisfactory alternatives to the option B. So ultimately, looking at this, if we were to take these as recommendations, things to consider with option B is obviously if we're renovating or building new on that site, again, temporary locations, additional properties may need to be purchased based on what that building needs to be. Option C would allow for the fire station to be built new once the police department was cleared from that, and then they would remain fully operational where they are, and then move over to the new location.
Can I ask a question? So if you went with option C, that's just the locational factor, right? What about, would it actually fit on the site?
That's one thing that we would have to test, that when we tested it as a combined, it was we had to take over almost the entire city block.
Right.
As just a fire station, we haven't tested that yet. We wanted to see if that was going to be an ideal location.
So those options, those are just right now in terms of response time?
Response times only.
Right, okay.
Correct.
So I know, though, from our discussions yesterday, that you've also done some other thinking, and for instance, the police department, where it should be, and whether we need to unhook this from a common building to two buildings. And so I'll let you take the floor again. One of the things that you discussed with Mason and I yesterday was perhaps putting the police department and the John Williams site if we could acquire it from the federal government.
Exactly. So part of gaining this data allows us to kind of analyze, step back, look at everything. And what kind of jumped out to us was kind of a hybrid scenario where if you took the police department out of the current site and moved them to potentially the John Williams, the police department operates on a slightly different scenario than the fire department, where they have zones that once you report for shift, they could go out and they patrol those zones.
You're not sitting in the station waiting for a call.
Correct. They are not at home base waiting to go out. That is more conducive to moving them around the city, or within the city limits. However, the fire department, this information is critical to their response. So if we were able to, in the option C scenario, take the police department out of behind City Hall, put them potentially at John Williams, that would allow for building a new fire station where the police department is, and then allow the fire department to move in. Ultimately, the scenario in that is, yes, you are building two buildings as opposed to one. There is some loss in operational efficiencies for utilities and whatnot down the road. However, they stay in the fire department stays in a more optimal position for covering the entire, that section of the city and providing optimal coverage to the city. And the police department is out of the mix, if you would, relative to trying to squeeze that much program and operations into one small site. And I use the term small site as relative to the overall building that we were talking about.
If the police department was gone from behind City Hall, based on my memory of the various building configurations you had, it looks like we have a much better chance of fitting the fire department in there, correct?
I think you do. You know, in giving the fire department potentially better situation than what they're dealing with currently, which is a larger apron to be able to get the vehicles out on and then make the adjustments to respond. A drive-through scenario, allowing them easier response for multiple vehicles in different directions. And then a little bit more parking for either the daily business of the department and the shift change.
Because one of the things I remember when we talked about the police department there was the number of vehicles that they have. I mean, they have cruisers, and then everybody drives to work. So if we didn't need to devote a lot of that space to parking for the police department, if the police department was somewhere else, that would make some sense, wouldn't it?
It does. Again, this station is if we just take headquarters and transfer it over, it's a complement of 8. That at change of shift, which is once a day, they do a 24-hour shift, is 16 folks. That doesn't take into account, you know, the chief and his staff that would be there. But it's a much smaller quantity as opposed to the police department at change of shift, which happens 4 times a day, and you get the double load, plus you have the cruisers that return. So,
And another idea I know you discussed with Mason and I yesterday was, does the chief and some of his staff need to be physically located where the headquarters building is, or could those administrative offices be somewhere else, like on John Williams Street? Would that be something that we could think about?
that would absolutely be a conversation to enter into with the chief, to see if that will also help with some of the program up at the headquarters, or, excuse me, up at the, potentially Park Street site or Union site, that if they are willing to or interested in coming over to that John Williams site, to make some efficiencies in operation there.
I mean, there could be conference rooms and other things, I guess, and it also struck me when we were talking yesterday that from what I'm seeing here, we want to make sure that the fire department's main function, which is fighting fires and ambulance calls and all the other things they do, is what we pay the most attention to. And administrative office space being adjacent to that isn't necessarily required, right?
It's more optimal for the fire department to be together. However, working with a few other communities, even when they are, this is going to sound confusing, even when they're together, those communities prefer not to be together as the fire department. And what I mean by that is the communities operate with a command house, if you would, or a command set of offices, and then you have the firehouse. And some of those communities prefer to have the office function be totally separate from the firehouse. So the firehouse runs and kind of governs itself, if you would, and the command is responsible for the overall organization. So in that as a theory, and I haven't had the opportunity to even have the discussion with Chief LaChance relative to that and how he would see that working for Attleboro Fire, but that is a possibility of something that could happen.
Depending on how much we can put behind City Hall.
Correct.
And then, and I'm sure you haven't discussed this with the chief either, but you mentioned to us looking at the Twin Village station.
Correct. So, as you can see from this here, on the map, a good portion of Twin Village appears to go into Seekonk for response. And forgive me, Chief, that we haven't spoken about this at all yet, but the thought came to mind that if we could pull that, based on another community I worked with, if we could pull that further into the city limits, it would be more response within the city. It might be worth an exercise to see if taking the Twin Village station and putting it on as part of the John Williams, so it would be a substation, a little bit smaller, be connected to the PD with the command up at John Williams, what that would do to a response map. It may not result in anything positive, but it might be worth the exercise to find out that, hey, we get a little bit more response within the city limits and less into our neighboring communities.
Did you fall over, Chief? I heard a noise.
No, I'm still here, I'm just listening. I mean, I actually have suggested that multiple times over the 14 years of station locations should be looked at, because back in the day when stations got located, it was very common to put them close to the borders of communities, and a lot of that was done because of the massive reliance on mutual aid. The problem is relocating them now. Relocating a Twin Village fire station, if I had to guess, I mean, you're probably looking at $10 to $20 million, at least 10. So I think that's worth looking at. I think the next part of the study needs to be looking at the types of calls we do, concurrent calls, and what the impact of relocating stations could do on response times, understanding that frequently stations are out of service. Like the South Attleboro Fire Station, that station's empty, probably completely empty, probably 8 hours a day. And when I first got hired on the fire department, it was almost never empty. So those are the things I think we need to look at, as part of the plan for the next 20 or 50 years.
Let me throw this out. If some of those stations are located intentionally along the corporate lines for mutual aid purposes, does it make any sense to look at the fire stations in those communities where they're located relative to Attleboro to see if there's any pushback? Like, does Rehoboth, so for example, if we look at Twin Village or Briggs Corner, so those are, from what I understand, initially located to be closer to those towns for mutual aid purposes. Did you map any of the fire stations in Seekonk, Rehoboth, and North Attleboro just to kind of see where they are stationed?
No.
Would that help only to see, if we have any overlapping like, almost like a Venn diagram, is if the response time from Attleboro to North Attleboro, you know, how does that overlap in North Attleboro into Attleboro? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so what you're basically saying.
So I'm saying, if we're intentionally leaving some stations closer to the border and it's stretching the forces out, what's going on from outside of Attleboro, pushing into Attleboro from fire stations from outside the city and their effect on our, you know, of servicing Attleboro?
I not knowing, but I would suspect, and Chief, I don't know how much you rely on, well, you said you did rely on mutual aid earlier, or how much they rely on you. I think, if I can, what Chief was saying is when they were located, being a different service type and service time, that's where these were located and why they were located that way, so that they did have that overlap. That is not as much the scenario
Anymore?
anymore. There still is mutual aid between a lot of communities, but it's, a lot more communities look internal as opposed to
Subsistence.
become self-sufficient, yes.
And mutual aid has now become, it's supposed to be, an uncommon occurrence. It can't be built into part of your response strategy. Because you can't rely on it. The Seacon fire station that's closest to the Twin Village station for many years was closed. The one in Charlie Station in Norton for many, many years was closed. And North Attleboro has got a call fire department. So you can't plan your city's safety based on the location of another community stations. It would be kind of dangerous.
Question for you. If in fact, if Twin River or Twin Village did move, could that potentially open up a different location other than City Hall or the current location for the headquarters due to the response times being different?
No,
Okay.
I don't believe so,
Okay.
to be perfectly honest. I don't know without running the study, but based on the imagery and familiarity with looking at these over the last several years, obviously not Attleboro's in particular, but different communities, by taking this red dot here and moving it further into Attleboro, what you're gonna do, and to use a gentleman's quote, is create your Venn diagram that's gonna be denser within your own city. There's gonna be better response and better coverage amongst your 4 stations as opposed to this section that's going down into Seacon.
Opposed to travel time, it might help response time.
Correct.
And then it also strikes me that the ladder's downtown for a reason, right?
Yes, I would assume. I would default to the chief, but I
Chief,
would
would it be
assume the
fair to
same.
say that the ladder is located downtown because that's where the taller buildings are?
That's the first fire district with the highest call volume, the highest risk of life, and the largest number of incidents.
Hey, Scott, can I just spitball something? Have you ever thought about moving, Twin Village to Finburg and incorporating the headquarters there? Leaving the downtown station as a station but not headquarters? I mean, we've got that land sitting right there.
Yep. That's I hadn't thought of that. That's an interesting thought. I had thought many years ago of combining Briggs Corner and Twin Village. It was just something I had, considered as a possibility, moving them closer towards like the Sutter or the park there, Ponce Hewitt. But that's actually an interesting concept that you proposed, Mayor. But it would require another response analysis.
Yeah, well, we could put Chief, does headquarters have to be downtown? Like, is it important that headquarters be in the downtown area, or could it function in Finburg with the?
What's important is for certain apparatus to be in the downtown. Based on the response analysis. So it's hard to say with certainty that the ladder truck would have to stay at headquarters. If we had a station, the old Finburg, maybe that would work.
Right. But I mean, we'd still have a station downtown, it just wouldn't necessarily be the headquarters. Right, okay.
Right, and it would be possible to run the ladder truck out of that station, so that's what I mean, that's a good points and for future deliberation.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Somebody have a question over here? Another thought that I had was dispatch. How would separating the buildings, where would dispatch be? Would it be one dispatch place for both departments located at one of the, or the other of the locations? Would there still be two that was a big factor in when we started this.
Correct. Again, haven't ventured down that avenue of discussion, having just come up with, the scenario of virtually, splitting the building. We've always been talking, one combined building. But to give an example, you have SEMREC, which is right next door, Southeast Regional Communications Center, that handles a significant number of your neighbors. It's got Mansfield on it, it's got Foxborough, I believe Easton's going over to it if they're not already. So the dispatch doesn't have to be within the building for each of the departments. I'm sure that giant concrete bunker on the hill would love to get the Attleboro community, but you could actually set up to be a regional dispatch from either location and feed other communities as well.
Well, I was just also wondering from a cost standpoint, for instance, if there was a common dispatch behind City Hall, if we had the room, is that useful? Or are we trying to put too much at John Williams Street? Or is this just stuff that you need to look at for the next time you come to talk to us?
It would be best to kind of, rather than off the cuff, just kind of conversation, be best to kind of meet with both chiefs, get a dialogue going as to, okay, how do you see this working for your community? And then again, feeding into if you want this to be available as a service to other communities as well.
Because I mean, this discussion is important, and seeing that the response times is eye-opening for me. But I think, we kind of know what we need. We don't know how to pay for it, but where has been a real vexing question now for a number of months. And so I think the most that we can control right now is to focus on the where, right?
That would be the ideal. If we can figure out the where, we can then start to figure out or what the scenario is going to be. If it's going to be this, option G or even an H, if we're talking the Finberg, and then start to put together how big are these buildings going to be, and then what's the cost associated with that.
Because we certainly have an obligation for a project of this size, a project of this cost, and a project that probably is going to be with us for another 100 years, given the frequency with which we build buildings. We have to leave no stone unturned, right?
You get all the questions answered, so that when you're approached as to why you're requesting this money, you can lay out the full storyboard of, as you just said, Jack.
What would you see as a timeline for you to come back to us again after having discussed these things with the chiefs? And I think the mayor's probably going to contact our congressman again, right?
Yes, I nudge them on a regular basis. I would love to acquire that building, for sure.
And so what would you see as a reasonable time frame for you to come back and make your next report to us?
What do you think, Sean? Probably end of February? It'll give us some time to
Say,
sit with
between
both
the
chiefs.
holidays and through January, probably the February meeting, which would be your third.
But we could do again what we did here, which is actually our school building committee meeting for February is not school vacation week. It is the Wednesday after that, something like the 28th, if I remember right. Mason, do you have that?
I think it was like the last day of the month.
Yeah, our meeting is February 28th in this room for the school building committee. So if you thought that February 28th would be an appropriate day to come back and we'll do a double header like this, that might make some sense.
At that point, though, too, we could also just look at the normal March meeting of the 6th, right? Because that's not school vacation week, right? Wednesday, March 6th is the regular.
Yes, so we could either do here after school building on the 28th, or we could do March 6th at City Hall, I guess, as part of our regular meeting. The only thing is the Conservation Commission will be meeting that night, Mason, so we might have to be here rather than City Hall anyway. So do you guys want to do what you have to do and then let Mason know whether it's the 28th or the 6th?
Sounds like a good
So
plan.
Jack, to be clear, what's the expectation then for the next meeting?
To develop what we've just talked about, which is the question of,
Dispatch?
well, it's splitting, if we can get the John Williams site, and what can we fit behind City Hall for a fire department? What could we do for a police department there? Would we look at putting maybe some fire department administration offices there? Would we look at whether a substation for Twin Village was there? I think those are the things, and where dispatch would be. I think those are the tasks that we need to look at, aren't they?
So, Jack, are you saying, so looking at the scenarios that they looked at, like B, C, and E being, B being the most optimal, C and E being the second and third most optimal, you're saying taking what they did previously and looking at the needs assessment, where you kind of mapped out what the buildings would look like, you're actually saying putting those on those sites, playing those out as those like three options. Is that the guidance we're giving them?
I think that is. I think we'd like to see them take this information and turn it into something concrete with a couple of examples of what we could do, so that we can evaluate whether those work or not. Because if they come to us and say, we can't effectively fit the fire department behind City Hall, well, that changes that discussion entirely.
Right. And we've learned what? And one of the things we've learned is that Twin Village is too far out.
And
Right?
if you
I mean,
look at the station
functionally
there,
speaking, yeah.
if you look at the station, it's.
And it needs to
Do
be,
you have the picture of it?
I do.
we've learned that the location of current headquarters it's in the right spot, even if it's not big enough, and that Twin Village is too far out and it needed an update anyway, so
Yeah,
we've
the
learned other
pictures-
things than we expected, perhaps.
It's the bottom picture there on the right, and it's basically two bays with the firefighters living above the equipment. And one of the things we've heard at our past meetings is that's not optimal for their health, right?
Correct.
And so we want to be responsible in looking at giving them a modern environment. I mean, that's one of the things you talked to us about headquarters. One of the things when we looked at putting the combined facilities behind City Hall was not living above the equipment.
Well, isn't that the same then for Briggs Corner? I mean, you've got a two-bay facility there. I mean,
They're on the side.
The living quarters.
I
is
think they're on the side there.
no, not in terms of the sleeping facility. I'm just saying overall, that's a ancient building. I know how many times the fire chief has put Briggs Corner down for a capital improvement for major renovation. So if we're gonna be looking at Twin Village, does it make sense to look at a modern facility for Briggs Corner too?
Well, it's all a question of money, right?
Well,
Go ahead, Jay, did you have a question?
Question, not to add more to your to-do list, but would it maybe behoove us to look at, as the mayor noted, Finberg, just a little bit more, whether it be a potential police station, whether it be headquarters and police, like, just a very quick, like, yes or no, or maybe kind of what, obviously, putting a fire station, I think, at Finberg would probably be the opposite way that we want to go, because that would be removing us further from the downtown than going towards downtown, but at least looking at that, we own the property, and
Well, to be clear, downtown, I'd defer to Chief LaChance, but There would still be a station
Oh,
downtown?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. I would just say not even thinking about the
Yeah.
Twin Village to
Okay.
Finberg,
Yep.
because that would be further towards Seekonk.
So you're saying, could the police department go to
Maybe the
Finberg?
police department, or maybe the police department headquarters. I mean, to me, at least personally, it would help to gauge the bigger picture if we knew that maybe we could already have the building for the police station.
Because one of the big unknowns is whether we will get the John Williams site.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
and,
we
and
control-
everything I'm hearing, that could be a year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, there's no, even if they, we don't know when it could happen.
If it will
Even
happen.
if it would happen and when, it could be years out. So that would be, it's a moving target, is my point. It'd be hard to plan around a moving target.
We control Finberg.
We can control Finberg, and I think when you guys considered Finberg, it was in the context of a joint location.
I think that was,
Right, and we ruled it out because it's certainly not big enough for a joint. The question is it big enough for one or the other?
Jack, if I may, one recommendation I would have for when KBA is mapping out the locations, or the actual, like, using the needs assessment that they did and the actual size of the buildings, putting them on sites. When it comes to combined dispatch, I think based on what we know within the city, if it was gonna be in one of the two headquarters, whether it be fire or police headquarters, it would be the police headquarters. So if there was gonna be a combined dispatch location, that should be attached to the police building. That would just be my recommendation. Just considering also like general operating expenses if you're where it's gonna live, in terms of staffing.
Yeah, that's important, obviously. Gary, did I cut you off? I'm sorry. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
I was just gonna add one thing quickly, the current headquarters location, something that had been discussed multiple times over the last 25 years, is the Richardson School. Because that's, I believe that's still city owned.
Yep.
And, there is some land there.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chief.
It might not fit a complex, police and fire, but it might be enough for one.
Yeah, we looked at it for the combined
That's right.
complex.
Right.
So now we can,
Well, I think we ought to go back and look at it for either
Right.
one of the two. Because there's a lot to be said for using land we already own.
Agreed.
Well, the benefit of that location, if it were to say the fire headquarters, is that we would pretty much be able to remain operational if they built it in such a way that that was possible. And it's not uncommon when you have a facility that's going up pretty much right next door.
Yep.
So if we were to combine that, the real estate with Richardson School with where 100 Union Street right now is too. So geographically, you might have sufficient area, but it's a very oddly shaped lot. So that's going to factor into the design.
Do you
So-
have a thing you can put up on the screen showing that? Do you have the
try.
you
It's
know,
adjacent
Google
to the
Earth or
existing-
anything? What?
Yeah, they're not, they're connected or they could be connected, but, it's not like one.
They're
like-
connected, then there's that house on the corner.
Yeah, it's kind of disjointed, the layout. So again, just looking at sheer area, it might be sufficient, but given it's, the layout might not be conducive to a building layout for a modern, a larger headquarters, but let's take a look if we get to see it.
So this is when we were, so that's it right here, right? Correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so existing station here.
That's the armory.
The armory, right?
That's the armory.
This is the school right here. So yeah,
Correct.
it would be this kind of that, and whatever, I forget what was here.
Couple, that's, I
A
think a
private
house.
residence. I think it's a private residence.
Yeah, I think that's a triple decker right there.
But if you were to take down the Richardson School, leaving the armory, and start building there, would you be able to ease the pain of homelessness for the fire department? Would you be able to put parking or something where the current station is at the end of the job? Is that something that might make some sense? I think that's what Gary was getting at, but
excuse me. Looking at it, it looks like it's got a potential. We'd have to dive into it a little bit more, because if we take this area here, That's the living quarters, that's your bays, kind of rotated it around. You could potentially have drive-through bays in the back here, living quarters in the corner, and then try and figure out something with the administration. That has a potential that it could fit, but without just looking at it size-wise. I just want to say it's potential, but we want to go much further into that to make sure that we've got safe operations for the equipment, safe circulations for pedestrians, and visitors coming to the station.
So when you talk about feasibility of building a new site, there's potential on this site, if this was just a redevelopment of a fire station, that the existing station could remain operational while building?
Could be, could be. Because we've built much closer than that. Needham was exactly 11 inches away from the operating fire department.
Still potentially, in that scenario, there may be an option that that armory still exists there, right? There may be a lot there.
Again,
Yeah, I mean, you'd map it, but I know the map, the overlay you have there was sort of the needs of the joint
with the joint, yep.
facility, so it's not necessarily that helpful to look at now.
And if dispatch was then with the police department, and perhaps the fire chief and his discrete staff were, not necessarily on this site, it might make it work better, right?
And the more we can get to an alternate location, the less building we have to put there. So there's a greater potential that it could work.
So I think we've got some really good ideas to explore here. I'm feeling more optimistic than I was a couple hours ago about this project. Of course, how much it's going to cost and when the public will want to pay for it's another issue, but we can't go to them unless we can tell them that we have looked at everything and we know what we need as a city. So that has to come first.
Right, and I think one thing that the public will appreciate, they won't appreciate the price tag, is the reuse of existing property that's underutilized, right? And we've got a couple.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, that's a huge factor. If we don't have to acquire any new real estate, work with what we have, sure. It cuts the cost. I'm not sure how much, but still, it's savings. But then on the flip side too, then you've got demolition costs.
You
And,
beat me to it.
Right, so you've got demolition, you've got hauling costs. There's not too many places that take that kind of construction debris. So, there's a added cost on that side. So, it's gonna be some speed bumps along the way. So we'll just take them as they come, I suppose. And then wait out to see what's gonna be the most optimal layout.
We may find, and we may find that we want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the Richardson School to figure out what do you have in there for material that we may have to deal with.
In asbestos-containing materials?
All of the above.
Fun
Yeah.
things, yes.
Because back in the day, they made everything they could out of asbestos because
yes.
it was a miracle thing. And it turned out that it had a few defects.
Absolutely.
So, any other thoughts around the room? No, as I said, I feel more optimistic now. I think we've got some real possibilities we can look at. And let Mason know if you want at the end of February or the beginning of March. Certainly spend whatever time you need with both chiefs. We'll be ready to hear you again.
Good.
That's great.
Is that all we need to do tonight, Mason?
You already adopted the minutes, correct?
Yeah, we approved the minutes.
So we're
Yeah.
good.
All right, so motion to adjourn at 7:09.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? We are adjourned.